Alright, we're back. Now we're going to talk about measuring matter, and really what we're talking about is ways to start to separate our different types of elements, right? We know that we have 110 elements, right? And we know that we have elements and compounds and mixtures, but when we're looking at our elements, how do we actually separate our elements? Turns out that we can use their properties to separate out the elements, but certain properties are more useful than others. One of them that's really useful is density. So let's start talking about our density. To talk about ways that we can measure our matter, we're going to talk about mass versus weight, because mass and weight are not the same thing, okay? Really, we're only going to use mass in our chemistry class, okay? So a mass is really the amount of matter. Okay? And the difference between mass and weight is that weight has to do with gravity, okay? So weight is the force exerted on an object by gravity. Okay? They kind of overlap. Really, on Earth, mostly, we're going to say that it's really about the same, but we're only going to use mass in chemistry class, okay? Because we have the same mass whether we're on the Earth or on the Moon. It doesn't matter how much the gravitational force is, okay? So, in density, we need to know about our mass, and we also need to know about our volume. Volume is the amount of space an object takes up. Okay? So if we remember, matter takes up space, has mass. So we need to know about our mass and our volume. Okay? So for our volume, we need to be able to measure how much space it's taking up. So we have a few different techniques. For liquids, generally what we're going to do is use a graduated cylinder. So a graduated cylinder, right, it's big and tall, it's got different marks on it, that's why it's graduated, right, and we can fill it up, and it's going to tell us what the volume of that liquid is, okay? For regular solids, we generally can just use a formula. We don't actually have to measure it with a graduated cylinder. We can just measure it using like a ruler or something, okay? So a regular solid, we have different formulas, right? So our cubes, we know, right? We just multiply side. So length times width times height, same with rectangular prisms. If we have a cylinder, right, it's a little bit more complicated. But again, we have a formula, so it's pi r squared, which would be the area of a circle, and then we multiply it by the height of that cylinder. Okay? And then if we have a sphere, then our formula is 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay? So if we have a regular solid, we can find out our volume by multiplying the sides. Or we can use our formulas here, sorry. If we have an irregular solid, so say I wanted to know the volume of my pencil, right? What I would need to do is actually use water displacement. Okay, so I would fill up my graduated cylinder, add my pencil in, make sure it's fully covered with water, and see how much the water changed. Alright, so if we have a mass of something and we have a volume of that same object, we can actually calculate the density, because the density is the amount of mass within that given space. It's a ratio of mass to volume. Okay? So there's a formula for it as well, and it's the sweetheart formula. So I'm going to draw a nice little heart here. Density is love, except that it's cut in half, right? Density is mass divided by the volume, okay? So with this equation, right, if I know the density and mass, I should be able to calculate the volume. If I know the mass and the volume, I can calculate the density. And if I know the density and volume, I can calculate the mass. Okay? You should be able to answer this question as well as to go on to the next page and answer those.